All right. For our next panel, we'll be discussing the potential benefits of a tokenized economy. Moderating, we have Sheri Kaiserman, who is a principal advisor and co-founder of Maco.la. She has 25 years of Wall Street experience, over which she actually wrote the first Wall Street research report on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency all the way back in the prehistoric times of 2013. Won't you all please join me in welcoming Sheri and our panelists.
Hi, thank you for having us here. So first of all, I have to make two corrections. Sorry. It's the pronunciation of our firm is Maco.la. For the record, Maco.la. Everybody says Maco.la. But now you'll remember it. The second thing is I didn't write the report, I published it. I educated my team at Wedbush. In the research department, we published the first research report. So I don't want to take credit for the writing. So I'm very excited to have our distinguished panelists here. KJ Erickson, CEO of Public Market. Bhaskar Krishnamachari, professor of electrical engineering and computer science at USC. Stephanie Hurder, founding economist at Prysm. And Steve Beauregard, Chief Revenue Officer at Bloq. So in terms of the benefits of a tokenized economy, I remember the first thing was about ICOs and the allure of the democratization of wealth and all the rage, and then all of a sudden the regulators came in and squelched that, and the conversation turned to security tokens and tokenizing illiquid assets, fractionalizing ownership. And tokenization is essentially putting real-world assets on a blockchain, digitizing them by putting them on a blockchain. And it's a means to decentralization. So this should lead to a less centralized internet, fewer intermediaries involved, greater privacy and ownership, self-sovereign identity, innovation, greater innovation, competition, and disruption. And what tokens allow you to do, simply, it makes things faster, cheaper, easier, automates things with smart contracts. But I think the most powerful thing, ultimately, is going to be using them as a mechanism to provide and align incentives. So I'm going to introduce each panelist as we go. And if you want to add anything if I missed anything, please do. But KJ is trained in economics and game theory. As a graduate from Stanford University and Oxford Business School, she's the founder and CEO of Abundance Labs, which is backed by YC, Y Combinator, back in 2016. And it's an incubation hub, and I love this. It's developing products for a more just distribution of wealth and improved economic systems through the use of alternative currencies. And KJ is a prolific author. Go on Medium. She's got some great articles regarding decentralization, tokenization, and lots of other things. So KJ, as CEO of Public Markets, can you tell us about Public Markets and what is you're utilizing tokens within the system? What is it allowing you to do that you couldn't have done without this?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So Public Market is a commission-free e-commerce marketplace where buyers can buy the same products from the same sellers that they would otherwise purchase on Amazon or eBay or private marketplaces. But because we don't charge commissions, we return those savings to buyers in the form of tokens. So say you buy a $100 item from the same seller that you would otherwise buy on Amazon. If you buy it through Public Market, you'll receive approximately $20 worth of tokens in return that you can then or will soon be able to redeem for gift certificates and ultimately merchandise within the ecosystem. And tokens are absolutely critical to us because they enable us to do things that previously weren't possible under the private company model. The first thing that they allow us to do is actually correct the end price that consumers pay without breaking price parity agreements. So the monopolized private marketplaces are smart to the fact that their sellers have to add anywhere from 15 to 40% to the price of everything they charge to account for the commissions. And they say, well, then you can't sell your products cheaper anywhere else. So our response to that is to say, okay, fine, the products are going to cost the same dollar-based price point, but we're going to give that back to you in tokens. It's basically the most souped-up loyalty or rewards program that the world has yet to see. So that's one critical portion. But what I think is actually a lot more interesting that tokens allow us to do and will allow almost any company that's built around tokens that has a network effect approach is to provide massive outsized incentives to early adoption, right? So in a network effect business, overcoming the cold start problem and getting early adoption of your network is absolutely critical. And we're just starting to see experiments around how you can provide huge incentives to try out a product while it's still in its infancy, because the expected value, if that product grows, can be so large. So in our case, the actual behavior we need to incentivize is purchasing and referring your friends to purchase. So what we do is we effectively have a mining pool. If you think of mining as a mechanism that encourages people to do something before a network is fully developed, that comes from the marketplace that rewards you based on your purchase volume and anyone you refer. So in the early days of the marketplace, it's likely that people can be earning even more in tokens than they spent in dollars for the product they would have otherwise purchased. And that's specific to us, but these are the types of incentive mechanisms that can lead to massive, rapid scaling that I think the internet has yet to see.
And where are you in this project? When do you expect a token to be launched?
Yeah, so we already have an active marketplace in private beta. We have 9 million unique products that are either already available or in the process of being integrated, which is pretty impressive. For context, Walmart currently has 75 million SKUs, and Jet.com had about 10 million at launch. So we focused on the supply side first, and now it's all about the incentivization on the buy side.
That's great. So another interesting model where tokens are being used are in TCRs, which are tokenized curated registries. And they're used in smart cities, and smart cities are doing some really cool things with tokenization. Bhaskar, how do I say your name? Bhaskar. His background is in academia. He's currently a professor of electrical engineering and computer science at USC, very prolific as well, has published over 300 technical publications, which have received numerous awards and accolades. And he's doing a lot of work in IoT and blockchain-related projects, working with smart cities. So Bhaskar, can you elaborate a little bit more on what you are doing with cities and what they're trying to do to become even smarter smart cities? What's tokenization allowing them to do?
Sounds good. So I have been really looking at this area of Internet of Things for some time. And just to give a very quick intro, the word things in there is really to distinguish it from the internet that we have today, which is primarily about people communicating with people. Email, social media, web, the data source and the data consumer are both humans. But the idea is that things such as sensors have the ability to give us insights about the cities that we live in. These could be sensors that are measuring everything from traffic to air quality to measuring things that help us with securing our cities and so on. Now, the first generation of IoT really has been very centralized, very single organization driven. So the same company that deploys the sensors also builds the application and the entire stack to be able to realize value from those sensors. And what we found in our research is that this is highly limiting. It prevents kind of economies of scale and network effects to really help our cities become smarter. So that you don't end up with a number of different IoT applications, each of which is a data silo. So we have an effort called I3. It's the Intelligent IoT Integrator. It's a public-private partnership, a consortium that is led by USC, backed by the city of LA, Verizon, Warner Brothers, a number of other companies and organizations to create marketplaces for IoT data. So the idea is that if you have sensors that are potentially valuable for one or more applications, you can monetize the data coming from those sensors. And there's an open source platform that we're putting together that allows application developers to come and see what are the IoT data sources for the city that can add value to the citizens here. And in our research, we're looking at blockchain mechanisms from smart contracts to micropayments to token-curated registries to decentralize these kinds of IoT data marketplaces. A token-curated registry at its core is a decentralized recommendation system. Token holders get to propose and vote on, for example, reliable data sources that would be recommended for particular applications. And our research is really looking at analyzing some of the equilibrium properties of token-curated registry mechanisms, and also looking at how do you give the token holders incentives to really engage with that recommendation system so that you're getting high-quality items in the registry.
And this is creating a whole economy around data.
Exactly. So I think that's the other kind of benefit of tokens, is not just tokenizing physical assets, but really digital assets. And in the context of cities, these are all kinds of sources of data that you can build rich applications from.
Very cool. Thank you. And Stephanie, Harvard-trained economist and founding Harvard-trained economist and founding economist of Prysm. Specializes in, which Prysm specializes in economic and governance design for entities utilizing blockchain technology. Prior to that, Stephanie was at Boston Consulting Group as a consultant and the firm-wide expert on organization effectiveness and design, and also publishes a lot on these topics. So Stephanie, can you talk about your thoughts with respect to when does something make sense to tokenize? When doesn't it? Start there.
Right. So I think this is a really, really great thing to start to think about, especially as there's increasing interest in security tokens. And there's a lot of potential for tokenization, but there's a lot of tokenization efforts that won't necessarily work. And so I think, especially when we're thinking about security tokens, one of the big issues is what are the property rights and the rights that holding the token gives you? So for example, suppose that I'm going to tokenize a piece of fine art, right? One of the things, if you really think about it, is that if you're a token holder, you don't just care about having this token. You want to know, am I allowed to participate in the governance? If I get paid when this art is sold, do I get to participate in deciding when it's sold, to whom, for how much? There's an
if it gets shredded after.
If it gets shredded after, there's a there's a good point. There's a requirement to think deeply about what exactly are the rights, especially for a security token, that I get, and are those rights transferable? Are those rights verifiable? You'll read about projects that are tokenizing stake, and the way they're going to verify that the stake you have in your hand is the same as the stake on the blockchain is they're going to DNA test the stake. Well, that's a little costly for most people. So I think that's one of the big issues. And the second thing we like to emphasize, and this goes back to the point around governance and something I'm sure KJ has seen on her platform, is that tokens are one part of incentive design on a platform, but there are lots of other levers that need to go along with that. So there are whole fields of economics around market design and contract theory and social choice theory. And tokens are a piece of this that interact with the overall system to make sure that users do what you need them to do for your platform to be successful. So those are just a couple of the economic things worth thinking about.
And have companies been having a hard time figuring out, if it went to raise capital, do I issue just a security token, which could either mean a token that has usage value, some functionality, but that's sold in a compliant way, or a token representing some kind of ownership. And with the regulatory situation the way it is there? How do you navigate that in this environment?
In this environment, I think, in my view, fundraising through security tokens is still relatively new. I think what we see is a lot of companies, as they start to understand the economics, especially of utility tokens, and they realize that that is not necessarily the right way to go about raising money in an economically sound way. And I think as we do talk to companies, they're thinking about this, and then it goes back to, what are the rights that the token gives you? Do they have fundamental value? What is the fundamental value that they provide to the holder?
Okay, and Steve. Steve's been a technology veteran for 25 years, a pioneer in blockchain. I met Steve back in 2013 or 14 when he founded GoCoin, which is one of the largest merchant processors, and which enables merchants to accept cryptocurrency as payments. He's currently the Chief Revenue Officer at Bloq, and Bloq helps Fortune 50 companies utilize blockchain technology. They also help established companies and startups create new economy token ecosystems, and they also incubate companies through Bloq Labs. There's so much happening with blockchain and companies doing things, and you can Google almost any company in the word blockchain and you'll see what they're doing. One of the more high-profile companies that's public and doing something utilizing tokens is Kodak. You've been involved with Kodak, and can you?
Just for clarity's sake, so Kodak project, Cam will be on pretty soon after. That's a project of ICOX Innovations. And so I'm an advisor to them. But that project,
perfect,
I think, just really illustrates the token economies and sort of what the possibilities are. And what I like there is that, I love the loyalty area that KJ spoke of. I think there's a lot of alignment of incentives there through the purchase and earning points and getting that loyalty. That's a really good example. Kodak is really good because now they're aligning now photographers or content creators with this platform. And for the first time, they're going to be able to instantly get compensated for people consuming their content. So I think it's really exciting from the standpoint of now being able to monetize something that's been literally takes weeks or months or sometimes years before content creators are even compensated for their work, if ever, sometimes. And so now, as people are consuming that content, they're getting paid. And it can happen instantaneously through the smart contracts.
Great. And you're also doing some work with smart cities.
Yeah. Actually, we have a hackathon coming up in Las Vegas along with World CryptoCon, where we're doing a contest in smart cities. The city of Las Vegas is involved with that, and so it should be an exciting project. But the idea here is, put a bunch of people, like perhaps some of Bhaskar's students, would come out and participate in a think tank kind of environment for 24 hours to thinking about traffic, thinking about how people are getting from point A to point B within a city, how you can utilize some of the information that's already available with these smart city projects, because there's really a lot of data out there, and how do you leverage it and optimize the flows. So
that's awesome. So given that it just seems like this environment, this whole industry, everything is so fluid and constantly changing. Have you experienced any changes in thoughts of how you were building out the system given the regulatory environment? Did that change? Did your project change at all based on regulations?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly the fastest moving industry that I've ever been a part of, and it's really fun as an entrepreneur and a founder because you're having to adjust and shift constantly. Certainly from a regulatory perspective, it absolutely impacts how you design your system. We were actually really fortunate to have been given very conservative legal advice when we started about 1.5 years ago that has turned out to be increasingly true as more and more guidance has come out from the SEC. And our approach was just to put our heads down and build enough to get to a fully functioning network and be really conservative with the approach that we took regulatorily. So fortunately, we haven't had to adjust that much on that front, but you've got, just a very fast-moving market, and there's plenty of places where you're bobbing and weaving constantly.
And so what's your vision, if you could each talk about, at what point, how many years is it going to be until tokens are truly a central part of the economy and everybody is involved in it in some way. It's built out. How long is this going to take?
Yes, so I'll go first with my guesstimate of the future. I think that in 5 years, we're going to see really meaningful adoption where most normal people are interacting with tokens, whether or not they are aware of that, right? A lot of this can happen behind the scenes. And I think in 10 years, you're going to see a really major shift of how the biggest corporations, especially the ones that are built around network effects, are created, and a real move towards elimination of extraction from centralized companies.
So the analogy I like to give is we're flying an airplane where we're still building it. And I think we need to have more patience. I think even token-curated registries, all of these concepts, we're seeing kind of the first version of these play out, and we're discovering problems with them, and we're fixing them. So I'm actually inclined to say 5 to 10 years, perhaps. But also just the adoption rate, I think barely 1% of all the people are even aware of what blockchain is at this point, right? So there's a long kind of educational process as well that's involved.
And where does this begin? Where do we see it first? Stephanie.
I think that's a great question. I think that there are specific opportunities in tokenization of assets, and just waiting for companies that really, again, get the specific rights correct and the token design correct. I'm just personally really excited about applications in labor markets, and I think that there are ways that blockchain's decentralization can be leveraged to empower workers, and I'm looking forward to applications like that that are sorely needed.
And you can also talk about your time frame. Sorry to throw that on you.
I really like the plane analogy. I will go with the 5 to 10 year plane. Yeah.
Yeah, I go back to my early days at GoCoin, and one of the problems we were trying to solve was the stablecoin problem. So actually, Tether was invented in my office a couple blocks from here in the early days. So Reeve Collins and Craig Sellers are dear friends of mine. And I want to correct the last guy from the last panel that said, in the white paper, it says, we might run away and steal your money. That's just total nonsense and self-serving. So these are good guys, and they were trying their hardest to create something, because the problem that we needed to solve is merchants want money. They want cash. We didn't want to go through the bank, so how do you get cash to them? So that was one of the reasons that we invented Tether in the early days, and it's done an amazing job. It's really what's built a lot of the ecosystem. It gave a safe harbor to a lot of traders when things would get really volatile with Bitcoin or with Ethereum as they go up and down. It really is a lot of the reason that the market had exploded the way it did last year. So I give a lot of credit to Tether, and those guys they designed a system with very little, maybe not the best architecture, but they were working with what they had to work with at the day. So I think really a stable coin, and as we start to see stable coins start to take over or one sort of emerge, I think that's going to be the catalyst, because no matter what you have in these token economies, you need to have some price stability or something you can depend on. And so as the tokens, whether they're security tokens or not, as that volatility goes up and down, that just adds risk to the merchants or to the individual, whoever's working in that economy.
And really fast, Metronome is an incubated block company. What is that? Yes,
that's actually a token that we launched, and it's meant to be a reliable money supply, and really to deliver on the promises of Bitcoin in the early days. A lot of Bitcoin, as it turns out, is a pretty bad transactional currency with the 10-minute block times for anything where you need to immediately issue another digital asset based on that transaction. You got to wait 10 minutes minimum, or on average at least. And so Metronome's really the brainchild of Jeff Garzik, and he looked at the industry and said, we need something that will scale that can act like money over the internet and deliver on that promise. And it does have some stable qualities as well. And it's a DAO, so the cool thing about it is self-governing. And all the proceeds stay in there. You can trade against the Metronome Ether pair any time of day. And so it's a really interesting project. So metronome.io if you guys want to take a deep dive on a cool project.
Thank you. I think our time is up. Cool. We'll keep talking if you want us to.